Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Yang Guang. This week we take a look at the UEFA Champions League last 16 draw. Which tie is the most exciting to watch? Who could trigger the biggest upsets? To unpack the questions, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Brandon Yates and Fu Yu. Welcome back, Fu Yu. It's nice to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be with the team.
All right, let's do this. Let's dive straight into the deep end. We have Manchester City against Real Madrid in the Champions League knockout stage for the 5th consecutive season. It's almost grown into a new European derby. Yeah. We know the old European derby used to be Real against Bayern Munich. This time, Man City reposted a picture online which lists 3 things that are certain in life: death, tax, and City versus Real in the Champions League.
This script is getting old.
Yeah. I don't like the first 2 things, but I'm quite eager to see the third. I guess fans all wish the 2 teams can meet every season in the Champions League. Last season, Real knocked out Man City in the playoff, 6-3 on aggregate over 2 legs. But the narrative this season, considering, the poor run of form of Real lately and their injury crisis, the narrative has dramatically changed. So, Fu Yu, from your perspective, is this tie more terrible for Real or for City?
I'm surprised that you used the word terrible. Actually, I think there's no doubt that this is the most evenly matched tie in this stage of the competition, the round of 16. Like you said, for neutral football fans, if they get to watch only 1 or 2 matches in the round of 16, it'll be this one, Real against City. For me, this isn't a question about who's in better form or who's got better players. When it comes down to these 2 teams, it's always about who has better luck. And I'll explain. For starters, both have gone through a rough patch, but especially City seem to have recovered or are on the mend. And in the Premier League, City have managed to keep pace. They're still in contention for the title.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so tight with Arsenal that it could come down to 1 match in the end. And I feel that the Man City Pep Guardiola is better than the Bayern Munich Pep Guardiola. So,
of course.
I think right now it's the right time for them to get into shape for titles. Here I use the plural because I believe they could win both the Premier League and the Champions League.
You mean City?
Yeah, of course. The Champions League is hard, but it's always these powerhouses in Europe that we're talking about. But the challenge for City is that their calendar is too tough. Although they are a squad known for their depth, if you look at their upcoming matches, it's too tough even for a squad like Manchester City. I think the key for them is that they want to work fast in the Champions League against Real Madrid, because the Los Blancos are the team that we always say have got the Champions League gene. And we all know what will happen when their resilience comes up. So City want to finish the job early. For Real Madrid, it's got a long injury list. Kylian Mbappe and Jude Bellingham are heavy losses, and most recently, Rodrigo is the latest casualty.
Yeah.
So their midfield will be facing a lot of pressure. But still, I think it's 50-50 for City and Real Madrid.
Still 50-50.
Yeah.
Okay, Brandon, does Real Madrid really stand a chance to knock out City if we compare how things are going with the 2 teams right now?
I think if even I was playing for Real Madrid with a Real Madrid shirt on, we would still have a chance, because there's just something about that Real Madrid jersey that brings out something in whoever is representing them. So I would never say that they don't have a chance. However, I would argue that at this point in time, City and Pep Guardiola, I think, are potentially going to discover a ruthless time in their season, because I think that they smell blood. I think they smell blood from Arsenal. And I think that they smell blood from Real Madrid. In Real Madrid's situation, they are limping in La Liga. They are literally limping in terms of all of the players that they have out. I agree with Fuyu in that Manchester City's schedule doesn't exactly bode well for their Champions League prospects. But I also think there's a lot of guys in that team that are absolutely ruthless. Erling Haaland being, front and center, literally as a center forward. And also when you've got now the best shot stopper in the world in Donnarumma at the back, I think that they've really got two pieces that could be the difference. Real Madrid have so many different concerns. Of course, they've got the Vinicius Jr. and racism thing, and he seems to be all over the place. And he tried to start a fight in the last game that Real Madrid lost. They've got injuries. They have an interim coach. But that being said, they also seem to be one of the teams that deal incredibly well with adversity, especially in the Champions League. But I just think at this point in time, considering that Manchester City have kind of been ruled out by pundits, including ourselves, I guess, in the last season or two in terms of their prospects for all competitions, I think that there's a lot of people in that dressing room that want to prove the doubters wrong, especially on the biggest stage. I just think Manchester City are slightly better equipped personnel-wise and mental state-wise to deal with this upcoming clash.
I agree. City might have the upper hand right now because I think it would be incredibly daunting for the man in white, Real Madrid. They just suffered 2 straight losses in La Liga. They barely survived the playoff against the Benfica to get round of 16. And their interim coach, Aviloa, I don't know. I just think he hasn't shown his ability to lead a team to crawl out of the hole, and not mentioning they are still enduring the injury plague. Rodrigo, not only his season with Real Madrid is over, he also announced he will miss the World Cup this summer.
Disaster.
And Kylian Mbappe is still questionable for this tie, so it seems like everything is against them. Nothing is in their favor, but we're talking about the Champions League. Real Madrid can stink in any competition but the Champions League. So I still see this as a 50-50 tie as Fuyu predicted. But with Man City, I'm not so sure about their title hunt in both competitions, the Premier League and the Champions League. I don't see the same consistency they had shown before. Yes, they introduced Semenyo, they introduced Gay. I don't see stable performance from that collection of players.
Yeah. And Jan Wag, I must jump in there because I feel a little bit bad about slating Arsenal earlier because I also remembered their victory against Chelsea. I think when the pressure was really on them was a really telling sign that maybe this could be the season where they get over their late season drop. I think that was a huge confidence booster for them, which could also affect City's chase.
Speaking of Arsenal, let's shift our focus to the Premier League leaders. They are the hottest team in Europe right now. Topping the league phase table has handed them a dream route, avoiding, absolute giants until the potential semi-finals. First, they need to deal with the playoff winner Leverkusen, and then a potential quarterfinal against either, giant killer Bodo Glimt or Sporting Lisbon in the Champions League. So, Fuyu, do you think this easier path is a blessing for them or a pressure cooker? Because we have to remember they still need to deal with the title race in the Premier League and the intense cup games domestically.
Well, if I were a supporter for Arsenal, I would be so happy for the draw. Based on the Gunners' performance this season, both at home and in Europe, I think in the Champions League, anything less than the final would be a failure, and no excuses will be acceptable. Arsenal are the most goal-scoring and least conceding team in Europe at the moment, and that already put them in contention for serious titles. And this time in the Champions League, like you said, they've also got luck on their side. Their half is so easy compared with the other, which has City, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, PSG, which it makes that half look like a Colosseum. And for Arsenal, they just have to it takes a lot of pressure off them and put them in position to chase Premier League title. I think they have the one thing that they have to watch out for, players' health. Of course, at this stage in the season, every team will have that problem to worry about. But especially so for Arsenal because they've still got a Premier League title to chase. And currently, I don't see any other team in a better position than Arsenal to go for both top honors.
Right.
Yeah.
My concern is that Arsenal's priority this season is still on the Premier League. So I don't know if the Premier League matches would be a distraction for them in the Champions League. Things might shake up a little bit in the knockout stage, especially for Arsenal.
Yeah, at least they'll have no problem getting over Leverkusen.
I guess.
Yeah.
Brandon, given Arsenal's painful recent history in the Champions League, do you trust them to make a truly difference this season? What is the realistic ceiling for them? A semi-final or final or finally the top of Europe?
Well, I don't know what's realistic, but I hope they endure a lot more pain as much as possible. But no, look, I think for you definitely hit the nail on the head there. I think that they are in a incredible position compared to any other major teams in Europe competing for at least the two biggest titles, arguably, the league title as well as the Champions League. I think that on paper, they are in incredibly powerful positions. I think that, if anything, I think the Champions League matches are going to be a distraction from their Premier League matches because I think they're actually facing a tougher time in the Premier League now than they'll be facing in the Champions League. So it'll be interesting to see how recent additions to Mikel Arteta's squad are going to be able to handle the packed schedule and beyond that. Another thing that Arsenal has to deal with, I think they're going to be coming up against teams in both competitions that don't have anything to lose. What does Leverkusen have to lose? What would Sporting or Bodo Glimt have to lose? So I think that set piece or corner FC, I think they're going to have quite a difficult time in the run up to the latter stages of the season. Although I think that we will see a lot more goals from set pieces, and their set piece coach getting a lot more bonuses from all the goals scored, which is just the weirdest Premier League situation to be in. I can't agree with Paul Scholes more. If Arsenal wins the league this season, they're going to be the most boring, lame team to ever win the Premier League. Anyway, I don't know if you can tell that. I don't particularly like Arsenal that much.
It's obvious.
Yeah, I think, I think in terms of being in the position that they are in the league and in the Champions League, in terms of the fixtures that have come out, like I said, they really couldn't be in a better position, right? So I think that a lot of those Arsenal players will probably be feeling confident, not necessarily relaxed, but I think that they will be full of firepower and full of confidence going into, firstly, the remainder of the Premier League. And I think, even though Chelsea aren't exactly firing on all cylinders right now, I think the win in that London derby is going to be massive mentally for Arsenal, especially after floundering against Manchester United and a couple of other teams that they faced recently. So I think that's going to be a huge confidence boost for them. I think the only thing they need to look out for is complacency. And they also need to be very aware that in those remaining fixtures, they are playing for everything, whereas other teams are potentially playing with total abandon, which I think against a very structured team like Arsenal could be very detrimental, like we saw against Manchester United. I know I'm talking about United again, but I think that what played in United's favour is that, we kind of played with abandon. We hit them on the counter-attack, and we played really free-flowing, almost tactic-less football against a team that seems to have everything planned out from start to finish. And I think that a lot of the teams that Arsenal will come up against, particularly in the Champions League, against teams potentially like Sporting or Bodo Glimt, I think those teams will also be playing with total abandon. And for a team like Arsenal, that is a tricky kettle of fish to deal with because of all of the analysis that Arteta and his backroom staff are so renowned for. So, yeah, look, I think Arsenal are in a great position on paper, and I think that there are a lot of intelligent people in Arsenal's backroom that are aware of the potential pitfalls. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see the run in the Premier League, particularly because I think Manchester City are very good at chasing down teams. And in the Champions League, because I think that Arsenal are so favourably positioned on paper, how they deal with that position of strength and how the teams they play against deal with not having any sort of pressure placed on their shoulders. So there's a lot of potential scenarios that I think Arsenal have to deal with. And it'll be interesting to see how Arteta, Odegaard, and all of the higher-ups at Arsenal deal with this seemingly favourable position that they're in.
Right. Brandon, how far do you think they can get?
In the Champions League, I think they can get to... I think they're almost guaranteed a semi-final. Almost.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think once it gets to the semi-final stages, even if it is against teams that aren't performing well domestically but are like a giant team, I think that's where it's going to be difficult for Arsenal, regardless of how well placed they are, how well they're playing, how well coached they are, because we know that the Champions League and knockout football is just a completely different package as opposed to the consistency that's required in the Premier League. So I think they get to the semi-finals, and then from there, I think it's anybody's game.
You must be praying for all those pitfalls to happen and trip Arsenal.
Pretty much.
Yeah, Arsenal looks incredibly strong this season, having at least 2 elite players in every position. But I just don't have this vision that they can win a treble or win the Champions League and Premier League at the same time. I just don't see this. Alright, before we move on, here's a quick review of the biggest sports headlines in China and around the world for the past week. Arsenal have moved 7 points clear at the top of the Premier League with a 1-0 win away to Brighton on Wednesday, while Manchester City was held to a 2-2 draw at home to Nottingham Forest. Meantime, Manchester United suffered their first loss under interim coach Michael Carrick after a 2-1 defeat to Newcastle United. Newcastle played for over 45 minutes with 10 men, but a dramatic last-minute winning goal from William Osula earned them 3 points. Real Madrid has announced that Brazilian forward Rodrigo suffered a severe knee injury during Monday's 1-0 loss to Getafe in La Liga. He will undergo surgery and will be out for at least 9 months, ruling him out for the rest of the season and the FIFA World Cup this summer. The setback comes a day after the club confirmed Kylian Mbappé is sidelined with a knee strain just a week before their Champions League lost the 16th first leg against Manchester City. Atletico Madrid are through to the Copa del Rey final for the first time since 2013. This came despite a 3-0 defeat away to Barcelona on Tuesday, as their 4-0 first leg win in Madrid secured a 4-3 aggregate semi-final victory. Barca head coach Hansi Flick says his side must accept the result.
Yeah, I think it was an amazing game from us. I think also we created a lot of chances to score also more goals. So at the end, it didn't happen, so we have to accept it.
Atletico will face Real Sociedad in the final on April 18th. In basketball, Team China rallied from an 11-point deficit to defeat Chinese Taipei 100-93, securing its second straight win in the FIBA Basketball World Cup Asian qualifiers. China now sits at 2-2 in the group, level with South Korea, while Japan leads at 3-1. At the WTT Singapore Smash, China's Wang Chuqing claimed the men's singles title with a dominant 4-0 victory over Chinese Taipei's Lin Junzhu.
Whether it's the Asian Cup or this competition, regardless of the points at stake, the opponents we face are always the world's strongest and the best. I will probably enjoy this evening, but later I still need to properly digest and review the gains and losses from this competition.
In the women's final, world number 1 Sun Yinsha defeated Wang Manyu 4-2, securing the title for the second straight year. China delivered a dominant performance at opening stop of the diving World Cup season in Montreal, winning all 9 gold medals on offer. Wang Zongyuan led all the way to win gold in the men's 3-meter springboard.
I'm very satisfied with my overall performance. From winter training to test events and now the World Cup, I feel my form is getting better and my confidence is growing stronger.
Teammate Zheng Jiuyuan claimed the silver. Welcome back. Now let's talk about Paris Saint-Germain. Last season, they transitioned from an era of superstar to a younger and more cohesive project under Luis Enrique, and they were almost invisible last season, finally winning the trophy they had dreamed for decades. But this season, things look a little bit off for them. In the French League, they can't quite get rid of the chase of Lens in the title race, and in the Champions League, they barely escaped Monaco to get to the round of 16. And now they face a tricky Chelsea side in a repeat of the Club World Cup final. And even the advance from there, a likely date with Liverpool awaits. So Brandon, are PSG still a top-tier European threat, or have they taken a step back into the second tier of contenders after a very successful season last season?
No, they're definitely still elite. I think that they're having post-great success struggles, which a lot of teams that don't have a lot of historical success and financial backing have. I think that is relatively understandable. And I think with a manager like Luis Enrique, who I desperately want at Manchester United, by the way, if we are able to retain Carrick. But I think with a manager like that, maintaining that level of intensity consistently without properly reinforcing the squad, which I think they kind of messed up in the transfer window. I think that, look, we don't know what happened behind the scenes with Donnarumma, and they do seem to be very set on having structures within the club that protects the club as opposed to allowing players call the shots, because we know that in the past, and Real Madrid are also seeing that big personalities like Kylian Mbappe and others, if they are given a sniff of control, if you give them an inch, they take a mile. And I think that that is something that PSG is very aware of. And I think that that's one of the reasons that maybe Donnarumma had his head turned by Manchester City. Look, I think no disrespect to that league, but I think that's just something that PSG don't. I don't think it's something that they need to give 100% of each and every single week. I think that they are aware of that even if they give 60 to 70% performances, they're probably guaranteed a draw. And if they come up against teams where, if they're not even playing their best, they generally win, because I think that they are generally, as a squad, head and shoulders above most competition in the league. That being said, Lens and, Monaco and whatever, they do seem to be getting a little bit better, but I still think that 100% of their efforts are always going to be in the Champions League. And even if you are giving 100% in the Champions League, if you haven't reinforced, and also teams are taking you more seriously and they are also aware of the way that you play, which I think is something they are dealing with more this season than they did last season, I think it's just naturally going to be a little bit harder. I think PSG still definitely deserve a lot of credit for being where they are, despite all of the struggles that they've had on and off the pitch. A match against Chelsea, I think that offers also quite an intriguing tie for them, because I also think that's another team that is battling for a lot. I think they will want to progress in the Champions League, and they definitely want to finish in the top four in the Premier League, but they are also very unpredictable. Chelsea and PSG are kind of in a similar situation where you don't really know what sort of performance they're going to deliver, and they are battling for different things, but I think they're facing battles that they both didn't expect going into the beginning of the season. So I think it's going to be a hotly contested tie. But in terms of PSG's drop, look, I think they focused on retaining key talent, which I think was very important for them, and maybe focused a little bit too much on that, as opposed to not necessarily rebuilding, but reinforcing, which I think PSG dropped the ball in a little bit going into this season. I think that they definitely needed some reinforcements that haven't really come in, and the people that have come in haven't really had much of an impact. And also a lot of their stars from last season, well, arguably their second biggest star from last season left. And then the ones that are there this season are kind of in and out of form or are struggling with injury. So yeah, I think that PSG still have a very good chance in Ligue 1, and I think that they also have a great chance of progressing in the Champions League, but they're not flying under the radar like they did last season and then got a win that they weren't expecting. They're now expecting to win and have a target on their back, and they don't seem to be dealing with that particularly well.
Right, PSG against Chelsea, that's a hard one to predict. Finally, let's put on our prognosticator hats. The round of 16 is absolutely stacked, but there's always been a giant slayer. For you, which team currently sitting outside the very top of the favorites has the best chance to pull off a monumental shock or send a heavyweight home early?
Actually, looking ahead deeper into the season, I'm not making any predictions for the round of 16, but I hope sometime later in this tournament, Bayern Munich will be able to pull off a upset.
Bayern Munich.
Yeah, I know they're the favorite for a lot of people, but as fans, supporters, both you and I, we know the Bavarians. We know the problems the Bavarians could run into once the injury crisis hit the teams. Later, it's the same for almost every team in Europe. Yeah. But we know that they are not completely able to handle the injury crisis once that blows the Champions League wide open. So I think they'll have a relatively easy path getting to the semifinal, but after that they'll need the stars to align for them to win the Champions League.
Brandon, who could trigger the biggest upset?
There's a few. I think Galatasaray Liverpool should be very interesting. I think the Istanbul atmosphere and Liverpool's struggle with counter-attacking. I think that could be a very interesting clash, and I'm not sure how well-equipped Arne Slot and Liverpool are to deal with that sort of really robust team and robust atmosphere. I think Newcastle-Barcelona will also be very, very interesting, because I think Barcelona have a lot to compete for, and they also tend to struggle if they go a goal down, and come up against a park the bus team. I think that is something that Newcastle have the ability to do. I think they can sneak a goal and make life for the likes of Lamine Yamal and Rafinha and a lot of these attacking stars very, very uncomfortable. I think we may just get something interesting from Newcastle-Barcelona.
Right, let's see who will cause the biggest casualty in the Champions League round of 16 and who will go all the way to the final. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.